Hi and welcome to HWRD. In this episode we'll have a look at ancient Soviet inkjet printer. In fact, this is the only Soviet inkjet printer ever made. There was no any other model. The design is kind of a copy of one of early HP inkjet printers. It does use a interchangeable printing head, which is quite similar to the Western ones. Its predecessor's print head still being sold today, and the only difference is that the Western one is driven by 24 DC, while this one is driven by 18 volt DC. However, the users were often modifying the printer aftermarket to use the HP inkjet heads. Yeah, this one is in fact refillable. You have an opening for a needle on the back. However, it is long since dead with the pads, electronic contact pads that used to be here, which had peeled long ago and deteriorated. The printer itself was in storage for some 2 decades perhaps, and we could say it weathered fairly well. It's dirty, it has probably some mice poo inside, so not the cleanest unit, but that's not the worst part of it. It's actually dead, and it was dead before it went to storage. For a long time, when I had this printer, I had it without power supply, without its original power supply. So I drove it, I believe, from a 12 volt DC improvised PSU. While, as I found out much later, it required an 7.5 to 8 volt DC original power supply. Bummer this, but it worked for at least 2 or 3 years like that, before suddenly dying on me without no signs of life when I flipped the very hard power switch on it. Let us have it opened.
Using just a couple of flathead screws. Some debris falls out of the unit already.
And now we carefully pry it apart. So we have a cable connecting front panel to the fairly compact controller PCB out here. You can see it's a Soviet version of Intel 8080A with I believe 64K ROM chip on it, and it has surprisingly 2 parallel interface chips for whatever reason. You'd think the only connection being one parallel port, one would suffice, but maybe they improvise it as a use of GPIO for driving motor or something. So we can try to pry out the front panel. Fair enough. We have a cable that supplies control signals to the printing head. We have a carriage motor. No, this one is carriage control, and this is page control, page advance motor, the one that advances actually paper. Yeah, there is some patchwork on the interface side here. There is a connector going towards, I guess this is a paper sensor, to determine if the out of paper condition is happened. This one, a flex connector in a kind of suspicious state, I believe goes underneath to a small PCB power supply, the DC-DC converter board, I guess, that supplies a few voltage. I know for certain that it has to run 5 volt for all the TTL logic on here. It has to run 18 volt for the printing head of the 7.5 volt supply. So there has to be some step-up circuit on there. It also has to have perhaps, yeah, maybe this is R18 or 12 VDC for the motor. Alright, let us disconnect the flex cable. Yeah, you can see it's not in the best condition. It's a bit torn, but I believe the pads are intact. Question is, shall we try giving it a power up and measure off a bit perhaps the voltages, or shall we remove the controller board and assess the condition of the power supply underneath? Well, let's see. Okay, so now I removed the controller board. It held with 2 connector screws and a couple nuts here over the power assembly. We can well see on the underside there is some patchwork on this board as well, but I think it came like that from the factory. So behind a bit of dirt, we see the power PCB here. Now I have disconnected connection from the power switch, and we can check the easiest thing first, whether the fuse is alive. Yeah, it's just fine. So no easy fixes. We have this transformer out here, which probably converts all the different voltages, and few regulators for different outputs. I think this one, the thickest one, and it appears it's not going via the transformer, so this could be 5 volt DC regulator. Yeah, so I had a bit of testing done on the PCB, and everything appears to be alright, at least from continuity measurements. The transformer seems to be okay. The most important thing, because this epoxy filler thing is impossible to repair. The caps, some of them electrolytics, appear alright. I measured them in circuit. They're fine, close to nominal. Power transistors and the linear regulator for 5 volt over here also appears to be fine. One thing we have here is a damage to the cable. We don't have continuity from connector to cable end, but that's something I can hope to repair. The worst thing I found, that this cable has deteriorated, probably corroded or destroyed by the ink head that was attached to it for better part of 2 decades. And what do we do with that is something to think of later. Right now it's disconnected anyway and there is no controller board. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna power it and measure rails one by one, see if it powers at all. I think I have the connector right. The center pin is negative, it's just normal barrel jack. And I'm gonna hook up 7.5 volt power supply to it. So magic smoke or not, here goes nothing. Oh, we have a disconnected cable actually. It turned off. Interesting. Could that be it? That would be ridiculous. I'm pretty sure it was connected before, because I've measured continuity from the barrel jack to both ends of the fuse. But what do you know? Let me solder it and we'll be back shortly. Kind of pain to peel it. Yeah, well, that should do. Yeah, warming up. Finally. So let me see. Turn up a bit here. And a bit here. Use this as a holder. Let's see. Yeah, look like it's there. Yeah, back in business. Let us try the power. Switch it off. Barrel jack. And yeah, we're getting a high-pitched sound. No, I don't think it's transformer. Could be the regulator maybe. Nothing warms up suspiciously. So step 2, let us do some measurements. So let me see what we have here. That's the ground. The output of linear regulator 4.97, almost 5 sharp. Pretty good for a rather old Soviet regulator. Let me see the outputs of these transistors. This one is 17.8, which is 18 according to schematics. This one is 11.912. So we are getting all our voltages. We can check them on connector jack. 12, right, the next one should be 5, I think. No, minus 5. Minus 5 is minus 347. Now that's interesting. Ground 4.5, 5 volt, 18 volt, 18 volt, two of them, 7.8 or 8 volt. So as far as I understand, I have a bit of schematics here. This is our output to flex cable, and the 8 volt goes apparently to stepper motors. The 18 volt is step up to printer head. The Western ones use, the HP ones use 21 and 24 volt. Plus 5, ground, minus 5, plus 12, so it all about checks out. I'm not sure why it was dead, pronounced dead the last time. Could it be that the power was in the power supply that I used at that time? Or could it be that, you see, on this connector, this last remaining line, which is our stepper motor voltage, plus 8, that line is actually cracked, so we don't have continuity. But in principle I should have had the panel lighting up at least. We'll see after I try to repair this cable and put maybe connector back, and then we could give it another shot, see if it wakes up without printing head connected. As I mentioned, this cable is pretty much destroyed. I have to think later what to do about that. But first I think I'll take it out of the chassis, remove this board maybe, and do it a good scrub. It's rather filthy, both on the motor part, on the paper advance, and the chassis itself. It could use a good scrub and some isopropanol bath. Okay, so the trouble as I see it now is on minus 5 volt rail is failing. It's supplying minus 3.7 volt instead, and that's not enough to kick the 8080 into work. As you know, 8080 requires 3 voltage rails, and minus 5 is one of them. So the filing component's a bit hard to tell, but I think it's this one glass enclosure Xena diode, which can be seen as marked as VD8 here. It sits right on the -5 rail, and all other rails for CPU, for circuit, for TTL, and for the motors for printing head appear to be fine. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna to order